I'm not going to tell you a lot about him because he's going to introduce himself and tell you some more in-depth things. But Dr. Wall is a chiropractor from Silverdale, and so he came a really long ways to come here tonight. He had an event this evening, and when I called him last month and asked him to do this, he canceled his talk in his office in his town to come and do this one for us, so, which is very, very kind. And the other thing that I want you to know is in a very short period of time, Dr. Wall has distinguished himself as the chiropractor in Washington and maybe in the nation for dealing with children who have really severe neurological symptoms, autism, Asperger's, ADHD, that kind of thing. And he treats almost exclusively those kinds of cases with really high degrees of success. I've learned a ton from listening to him, and so I wanted him to come and speak with us here tonight so that we can learn about this, because this stuff, it seems really hopeless sometimes, right? The people who are dealing with this in their families and their lives, and there are way more answers than they think there are. So just as a housekeeping note, there are bathrooms in this space. We have some next door, but right down that hall in between, there are 2 bathrooms at the back of that if you need them. Did you have a question?
Maybe videotape or...
I'm okay with it. We're videotaping. Are you okay with it? Yeah. He's already all over the internet. But again, please give him a really warm welcome. He left his wife and little baby boy to come here and do this for us tonight.
All right. So, as Aaron said, I'm Dr. Wall. And I have to first thank Aaron for inviting me down here and his awesome wife for hosting me and for giving me this opportunity to come and talk to you, because it's really important that I give this talk. It's important that you know the information that I know, because you're the ones making the decisions, not me. I can only do what I can do, but you have to make the decisions for your kids or the kids in your life. Now, I play that song really specifically before this talk. Yes, it has the perfect storm in the lyrics, which I do like. But if you listen to it, it actually talks about really key important things. And some of those are, do you want to play with magic? And that's what we're doing. We're playing with magic. When we put kids on Ritalin, when we put kids on Strattera, when we put them on all these medications that dumb them down, we don't know the outcome. We're just playing with magic. It also talks about being addicted. You played with the magic and now you're addicted. So many of our kids are addicted to these drugs, and it's killing them. It truly is killing them. We're going to talk about that tonight. But not only that, it talks about a dark horse. And to me, when I think about that dark horse, I think about something that's not too good, that's kind of sneaky in how they do it, and doesn't give you all the information. My job as a doctor is to teach, and that's what I do. I've given this talk up and down Western Washington many, many times. This is my 3rd time in the Seattle area doing this talk. And every time, we hear the same questions from moms and dads. That is, what can we do? Why didn't I know? So that's how important this information is. Truly, when I also give this talk and I promote this talk and I tell parents about it, I tell them it's life-changing. And you're going to see that tonight. The information we're going to present is life-changing for children across this nation. We're going to talk a little bit about ADHD. We're going to talk about autism, epilepsy. We're going to delve into environmental factors that cause these children to end up this way. Unfortunately, a lot of the science today is a little bit flawed. I have nothing against the medical world. Please understand that. They save lives every single day. But there's some science they're following that's not too good. And we're going to talk about the true science today. We're going to delve into science. We're going to delve into neurology. It's going to get really deep. We're going to use really big words, but I'm going to explain them to you, okay? Because I don't want you leaving here confused. And if you are at the end, come and talk to me. I'm totally transparent. I'm going to answer. I'm going to stay as late as you want. We're going to do it. My little boy's probably asleep by now, okay? So it'll be good. So With that being said, oh yeah, if you see me squint, it's not because I forgot my glasses, okay? It's that glasses don't actually work for me. I do wear them every now and then to look really smart, but I didn't want to outclass Dr. Collins, so I just played it a little bit dumb. So I will be squinting. We can talk about that later. But anyways, so I'm Dr. Nathan Wall. First off, I'm a husband. Second off, I'm a daddy. And I love being both. But I also love presenting this to you, so this is why I made the sacrifice to come here today. I have a bachelor's in general science, a doctor of chiropractic from Palmer College of Chiropractic, postgraduate training by the International Chiropractic Pediatric Association. Also, graduate and postgraduate, specialized training working closely with special needs children. I also work with a lot of pregnant women, very big proponent of birth options. In fact, my wife and I didn't really do much, but she had a home birth recently and it was totally awesome about 9 months ago. A lot more intense than I thought it would be as my first, but I got through it. It was good. So, I know, it was tough, but we did it. I seriously have so much more respect for my wife. Like, it blew me away. So, why do I do this? Why do I leave my family? Why do I cancel my talk in my town to come up here to Burien and talk to you? To save children's lives. And I truly mean that. Because that's what's happening every single day. We're saving children's lives. It really got big for me about 9 months ago when my little boy was born.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's little Seamus. He is a spitball and he is totally just like me and I'm a little bit worried. But it'll be okay. The biggest thing that I know why he'll be okay is because his nervous system from the first 4 minutes from being born was checked. There was no interference in his nervous system from 4 minutes of life on. And we're going to talk about how that's so important and why your kids and kids in your community and kids that you know need to be checked. So this is an awareness test. All right, so I want you to watch this. I'm supposed to pause this like halfway through. I'm never good at it. We're never going to make it happen. I try every single time, okay? But I want you just to listen. I might talk a little bit over it, okay? But watch for a moment here.
This is an awareness test. How many passes does the team in white make?
So watch the basketball. Watch how many passes that team in white makes. How many? 13. 13?
No.
Good. 13, 9. Very good. Very good. Let's see the answer.
The answer is 13.
13. You guys rock. That was a lot of 13s. Very good. But let's check out what really this was about.
But did you see the moonwalking bear?
So we watch this. Don't watch the basketball. Just watch in the background.
Oh my God.
How many missed that? Yeah, probably everyone, right? Because we're not focused on that. And that's what's happening in our community. You know, in my community, everywhere I go, I was just in Costco yesterday, and they had this guy out there, and he was promoting the $14.99 flu shot. Because our community is so worried about the flu. We're not worried about these kids dying. We're not worried about the 1 in 5 kids that are diagnosed with a developmental disorder. That's the moonwalking bear. We're worried about the measles outbreak, right? That's what we hear on the news all the time. But in my community, we're worried about kids that are stuck on drugs that are killing them. That's what's happening. No one in our communities, especially the medical community, the politicians, people that make the decisions for your children, they're not watching that. They're watching the ball. There's reasons why I'm not going to go into so much of on one's a little green piece of paper. So 2 rules. Growing up, we all heard these same 2 rules when we went to school, okay? Anybody know what they are? Give me one. First one. What's the first rule? You go to school, we're all there. What's the first rule?
Get vaccinated?
That's the new one. Unfortunately. Very good. Give me like some solid basic rules of very good though.
Raise your hand.
Raise your hand, I like it.
Keep your hands to yourself.
Keep your hands to yourself. Very good, very good. Those are good ones. Don't call kids names, right? Yeah, we're all told that like kindergarten, right? I remember my mom telling me that. Don't do that. In fact, we learned that growing up with siblings. But unfortunately, what do we go and do? We label our kids, we call them names from day one, right? We go with autism, ADHD, sensory processing, Asperger's, OCD, anxiety. That's what we do. So we tell our kids, hey, don't call kids names. It's only a big person's job. And we label them. I have kids in my community, and I'm sure you do here, that are diagnosed with autism at age 2, that are put on ADHD medication at age 2. Age 2. That's insane. That can't happen. Their brain's not even developed enough for that. But we're doing it. What's the other rule? This one's easy. I'm going to give you a hint, okay? Anybody part of the DARE program? You guys remember that? Like 5th, 4th grade, right? Yeah. Everyone knows that. Don't do drugs, right? That's what we're told. There it is. But unfortunately, what do? We put our kids right on drugs, right? We do Ritalin, Strattera, Prozac, Concerta, Adderall, Focalin, Zoloft, Klonopin. All of these, right? This comes in and out of my office all day long. This is what's happening in our communities, but it's the moonwalking bear. No one's paying attention to all this. This is totally happening, but no one cares. So our children today are the sickest generation in decades. It's a generation that's not expected to outlive the other. Take that in for a moment. That's never happened before. But that's happening in your community. That's happening nationwide. And it's definitely a generation of mothers that are confused about their children's health. You want to know how I know that? You're here today. It's very easy for me to fill rooms of moms that are confused. And that's unfortunate because it shouldn't be that way. We sell giant rooms out for this talk. Hundreds of people come to this talk because they're so confused about what to do. Because the people that are in charge of their health aren't doing a good job anymore. So drugs and doctor visits are on the rise, as well as chronic illness. That doesn't make sense, right? Because drugs heal you. And we have the most prescribed drugs in the whole world, but our doctor visits are on the highest level. That doesn't make sense. That contradicts each other. If drugs were working, chronic illness and doctor visits wouldn't be on the rise, but they are, and they continue to be on a steady rise. A 2006 study of the Journal of American Medical Association shows an increase in chronic health conditions among children in the United States. How much of an increase? 30%. Now that's from their own journal. That's not Crazy Chiropractic Journal of the Week. Okay, that's out of their own journal. 30%. That's not doing good. And chronic conditions on the increase, such as asthma, ADHD, Asperger's, autism, allergies. Ear infections are huge. Obesity, OCD, bipolar, epilepsy, cerebral palsy, speech delays. All these are on the rise in our community. I could do a talk on all of these and fill the room. Because moms aren't getting the answers about these. Because moms are being told what you need to do is take this pill. And 99% of that time, they get no results. Nothing. I shouldn't say that actually. They do get results. They get a really dumbed down kid. And we can't keep doing that. Truly, we have a sick society. So like I said, everyone's worried about the flu. Remember the swine flu? How many flus? We have like pig flu, mom flu. We have so many different flus going on, and everyone's worried about this, right? This is what we consistently hear. But the moonwalking bear is asthma. 1 in 10 kids, a $50 billion cost. No one's talking about asthma. I remember growing up, how many kids in my class or your classes had a nebulizer, had an inhaler? Like one, right? Now you're the minority if you don't have a couple. Yes, kids are full of asthma and full of these drugs. ADHD, 1 in 9 kids right now. In boys, that's 1 in 7. Oh. 1 in 7 boys are diagnosed with ADHD. It's the most common drug prescribed in this class is very similar to cocaine. We're going to talk about that too. Mental illness, 1 in 5 kids. 1 in 5 kids is going to be diagnosed with a mental illness. That's way too many. So the effects of a bad healthcare system. So figures show that an estimated 6.4 million children, ages 4 to 17, will have received the ADHD diagnosis. 6.4 million. That's way too many. I personally think 1's too many. The 6.4 million is absolutely insane. And no one's talking about it. So about 2/3 of those have a current diagnosis, receive prescriptions of stimulants such as Ritalin and Adderall. And both Ritalin and Adderall are Schedule II narcotics. Does anybody know what that means? Schedule II narcotics. That's on the same level as cocaine, methadone, oxycodone, and morphine. You wouldn't give your dogs those drugs. But we're giving our kids every single day these drugs. But it's not the parents' fault. Because you weren't informed. No one gave you the right answers. That's why we do this. To give you the answers so you can choose the path you want for your child. So the rates in your lifetime. How many people in here know a person that has autism or a child that has autism? Yeah. Yeah, it's usually a full rip. That's way too many. 1 in 50. That's how many have it right now. You'll hear the news science says 1 in 68, right? That's what everyone wants you to believe. What they didn't tell you is how that study was done was a phone call. And they said, we only want the kids reported of age 8. We don't want any other kids reported. Why? Because 1 in 50 was really scary for the CDC. So they made it look better. 1 in 68 now this year. Awesome. Very good. They're doing a lot better. So what's the AMA's answer for the increased rates of autism? Anybody? You can shout it out. Genetics. Okay, very good. Nutrition. Good. Very good. Better diagnosing.
Right.
Yeah, that's what their answer is. We have some amazing pediatricians. Those guys are doing really good because they're really diagnosing this really well. In my community, we have one doc. I live in a military-heavy community. We have one doctor. You could bring your kid in totally fine. No issues, no motor issues, no emotional issues, no nothing. She's going to prescribe him she's going to diagnose him with autism. We're currently trying to put together, don't say anything, an investigation on her as to why she's doing this. Do you know what that does to a family to receive that diagnosis when there's no reason for it? It rips them apart. But on the other end, we do have kids that are delayed. We do have kids where something's happening, and we're seeing that massive rise. So when I hear better diagnosing, I gotta tell people you gotta drink that Kool-Aid quick, because that doesn't make any sense. Not at all. So let's do a little bit of math here, okay? If we extrapolate out for the same rate of increase of autism at 13% yearly, what does that look like in a couple years? So in 2016, we're at 1 in 18, 2018, 1 in 14, 2021, 1 in 10. So 2022, that's your lifetime. 1 in 9 kids are going to be diagnosed with autism. But don't worry, it's just better diagnosing. They're doing an amazing job. That's what they're doing to our kids. So what happens to these 1 in 9 kids when they're adults? Where does that come from? Where does that money come from? Where does that support come from? That's what's happening in our society today. It's really sobering to think 1 in 9 kids. And that's only to 2022. Take a look at this.
The biggest contradiction in our culture today is calling medicine healthcare. We spend $2.7 trillion per year, and we're incredibly sick as a culture.
I don't think any of us would have a problem spending that much money if we got results, but we're not getting the results
results for that investment.
I feel worse now than I did 2.5 years ago when I started seeing, I'm told, some of the best people in the business.
I went to numerous doctors, and my husband said, "What do we do now?" And she looked at him and she goes, "She was sending me home to die."
We're seeing patients that truly have had the best healthcare money can buy. They've been to every specialist, and they're sort of missing this important piece.
Alternative treatment has not been allowed to flourish in the medical community. It's basically been stifled.
The AMA's goal and objective is to contain and eliminate the profession of chiropractic. All these things interact and have impacts on individual people's lives.
You guys know, he says,
Soon your son has cancer.
They did all these things to try to find some cancer, and every one of those tests came out negative. Yet the doctor still kept saying, "Well, we still expect you to come, Thursday morning to start chemotherapy."
We have patients that have absolutely no benefit from the surgery we provide.
I had a man come in my office the other day with 8 back surgeries. He didn't need one of them.
People who have back pain, a manageable problem, they get put on this drug, and next thing you know, they substitute their back pain for a drug addiction.
The pharmaceutical industry doesn't have any respect for you. They're talking about which drug whore to get to promote their products. They have no respect for their whores.
Every year, 125,000 people die from properly prescribed prescription drugs.
It's a cost of doing business. The lives are lost. People are dying.
Cooperation and integration are really the key. How does it change? It changes one funeral at a time.
That's a really awesome movie, and Doctor was produced probably, I think, about 2 years ago, maybe a little less. Take a chance and watch that movie. It's going to be eye-opening in a lot of different ways. It's called Doctor. I'm sure Dr. Collins can get you that video or a link to go with that video. It's really cheap, but it's going to open your eyes to a lot of different things that are happening in our healthcare field. That's the Moonwalking Bear. That lady out there who said, they don't have any respect for you. They're just worried about their drug whores. She was one. She did that. She's a pharmaceuticals rep, an ex-one. But when her niece lit herself on fire because she was on so many drugs, that's what it caused her to do, she thought twice. That's happening. But that didn't make CNN. You didn't see that there, right? Fox News was not down there covering why this little girl lit herself on fire. We were worried about all this other stuff. We were worried about the flu, the measles.
That movie Sicko is one thing.
It is. So what's the perfect storm? And we're going to talk about that. Because the perfect storm, unfortunately, is raging in your backyard. It's there, it's happening. Teachers see it, but they don't know what to do. Occupational therapists see it, but they're confused. The perfect storm starts with the physical trauma. And we're going to talk about 3 things today that are highly important. Emotional stress, physical stress, and chemical stress. We like to call them the 3 T's. Thoughts, traumas, toxins. All 3 of these play a major role in not only your kids' lives, but your lives as well. So a lot of people are wondering, kids don't have any physical stress until they're maybe walking, right? No, not true. And uterine constraint, we deal with that a lot. So when baby's malpositioned, baby hasn't taken the optimal fetal position, there's a lot of intrauterine constraint. When mom's given Pitocin, and she's not ready for that, but the doctor and the nurses are like, you need it, because we got another one and another one in another room, and we got to stay on schedule here, because that's what's happening in my community. That baby's pressed up against mom's cervix and compacted, because now she's having irregular contractions. If you've ever been on Pitocin, I haven't, but I've definitely talked to a lot of moms. It's pretty crazy. And if you didn't get the epidural, you're really going to feel it. And moms will tell you, when they had a non-epidural pregnancy, a non-Pitocin pregnancy, it was like night and day. But that's what's happening. That's one form of intrauterine constraint. We also have birth trauma, such as forceps, vacuum, cesarean sections. Our cesarean sections are 1 in 3 right now. 1 in 3 across the board, pretty much in the nation. But when a hospital gets to like 1 in 4, we basically just congratulate them, like, you did a really good job. That's really awesome. Yeah, there's a lot of scheduled C-sections, but C-sections have their place. Don't get me wrong. They save lives. They're there for a reason. But 1 in 3? We're going to talk a little about C-sections in a moment here. I want you to watch this real quick, though, because here's some minor trauma.
I think this is called funny balls.
I would like this.
I would like that to happen to me. Oh!
Because it's intense to watch. But remember, when moms come to my office and I ask them, has your kid suffered any physical trauma? And they're like, not at all. And then I ask them about different things, and they're like, oh, yeah, little Johnny was pushed over like 3 feet off a ledge, but he was okay. What that does to your nervous system, what that does to your spine, has an effect. That's what we're going to talk about tonight, but we're going to build on that, okay? This is about chemicals. We're going to watch just a little bit of this. So the other T is about the botulinum toxins.
In the last 50 years than in the previous 10,000. The modern supermarket has on average 47,000 products.
The industry doesn't want you to know the truth about what you're eating, because if you knew, you might not want to eat it. We've never had food companies this powerful in our history.
Everything we've done in modern agriculture is to grow it faster, fatter, bigger, cheaper.
If you can grow a chicken 49 days, why would you want when you got to grow it 3 days?
There's an illusion in the first place. So much of our industrial food turns out to be originations of corn.
Sometimes you look at a vegetable and say, okay, well, we can get 2 hamburgers for the same price.
They have managed to make it against the law to sell us the products.
There is an effort to make it illegal to publish a photo of any industrial food operation.
I find it incredible. The FDA wants to allow the sale of meat from cloned animals without any labels.
Peanut butter contaminated with salmonella.
E. coli has been found in spinach, apple juice.
All right. That goes on for a little bit longer than I want to go. But you get the idea. I think a lot of people understand that our food is really contaminated today. I don't think we need to delve too much more into that. You know, I heard a quote the other day. It was really good. And it said, you know, humans need certain things to survive. Water, air, and food. And we've contaminated them all. How does that not have an effect on us? Things have changed in our environment so much. The emotional stress someone goes through, the chemical stress, the physical stress someone goes through is totally different than when me and you were growing up. Let alone 20 years ago. It was drastically different now today. So emotional stress. This is another one I think moms just don't understand yet, and that's okay. That's why we're doing this. But when a baby comes from the most awesome place in the world, right? In mom's uterus, it's nice, it's dark, it's cozy, it's warm. And then they're yanked out by their ears, because that's what happened to a baby in my practice. Dad had to sit on mom while baby was yanked out by his ears. Yeah. So that's not the best way into the world, right? Maybe a forceps delivery, right? Through C-section. That's probably not the best way. Then we take baby and we seclude them from mom a lot of times. Take him to the nursery. If something bad happened, we're going to take him to the ICU. They're away from mom. That's an emotional stress. We can't say that that baby's not feeling an emotional stress. We can't say that they don't recognize that. In fact, they're probably more in tune to it then than they ever will be. But that's how things have changed. And there's a lot more emotional stress. I see it every day in my office. How about labeling alone? When we label that child with ADHD or autism or whatever, they take that on. I had the worst experience I've had in a long time a couple weeks ago. I walked into a room to a new patient, a little girl, and I said, "Hi, I'm Dr. Wall." She said, "Hi, I have autism." What? That's what she identifies herself as. I have autism. Not even a name. No nothing. Hi, I have autism. Mom didn't even tell her why she was there, because she's scared of doctors. But that's her response. That was eye-opening for me, and I see a lot of these kids. So poor home life, different things. Some of these emotional stressors are inevitable, right? They happen. We deal with them as adults. But there's a lot of them that we can start to avoid because they have a massive effect on your nervous system and how you're functioning in your life. So I talked a moment about how we have thoughts, traumas, toxins, so chemical stress, emotional stress, and physical stress. That's the perfect storm. Pretty simple, right? We could end here. But you don't know enough about it yet. You don't know how that truly affects your body, so we're going to delve a little bit deeper. That creates this big fancy $10 chiropractic word called a subluxation. We're going to talk about what a subluxation is. We're going to talk about how that truly affects your overall health and how it's really starting to affect the kids in our nation's health. So the perfect storm, unfortunately, starts off very, very early. Right away, we have fear intervention-based pregnancy. So many moms are forced into certain things. So many moms don't know they have options when it comes to their birth. We just raised $33,000 in our community to start a standalone birth center because too many moms are being forced to do things they don't want to do in a hospital, and nor should they have to. But moms are being forced to do these things because they don't know they have options, because they don't know the true effects of what happens to their child when they go through that process. So then we have the birth injury. We talked a little bit about that. We're going to delve into that a little bit deeper. So when baby's yanked out by their head or twisted because doctor has to rotate the shoulders, because the shoulders will rotate themselves. They truly will. I've seen it myself. But that doctor's got to get down the hall or whatever. I'm not sure their motivations when it comes to that, but they definitely want a speedy process in a lot of situations. Some of it has to do with insurance companies. That dictates how those OBs work. It truly does. But we get that subluxation starting from day one. We're going to talk about what that is. We're going to go into it, but I want to build this for you. So from day one, that child has this physical trauma. Then we start to see a lot of this. Colic is rampant. It's everywhere, but it's so rampant, it's the norm. It's like, oh, my kid has colic. Don't worry about it. It's no big deal. We're going to get out of it. But what is colic? Your kid at 4 weeks just starts going nuts? That's what it is? That's just what happens. That's not normal. We're going to talk about that. They don't sleep well. That's a big indicator that something's going on. When kids aren't sleeping well, that's a red flag right there. Then after that, we have difficulty nursing. So what happens? Mom usually turns to formula because she doesn't know the options. She doesn't know that there's an awesome lactation consultant in her community that's going to come to her house for free. That's what we've created in my community. They show up 4 a.m. in the morning. I love her. She's amazing. She helped my wife out. This is in your community. I promise we can find a lactation consultant in your community that's going to help you. But a lot of moms are just told, hey, just go formula. It's so much easier. Do the bottle. It's going to be okay. What's the #1 ingredient in formula? Sugar. Yeah, so we're going to start baby off in sugar, and then you're going to come down the road 4 or 5 years later and say, why does my kid so hyperactive? What's going on? That's what's happening. Chronic ear infections. Because now that baby's not eating well. Now they're not functioning well. So what does that do? That causes the backup in the eustachian tube. We can talk a whole hour on why ear infections happen and why antibiotics will not clear up your child's ear infection, because 85% of them are viral anyways. But we're going to go ahead and do that. In fact, the most common reason for a child to go to a pediatrician today, ear infections. It's like 55% of kids that go to a pediatrician are going for ear infections. That's insane. Antibiotics then are given, right? Because that's what we do for a viral infection. We give an antibiotic. Then, because we've given your kids so many antibiotics, it starts to depress their immune system. It starts to really have a systemic effect over their whole body. And we start to see nebulizers, inhalers, singular. That's a real popular one now, too. Then after that, we're going to give your kids some toxic food, have an awesome toxic environment, because that's the norm today. And then after that, don't worry, we're going to pump you full of 68 chemically filled vaccinations. That's what happens. Now, in this talk, I don't delve a lot into vaccinations. But I want to clear something up right now that I always clear up. Vaccinations do not cause autism. The perfect storm causes autism. Different chemical, emotional, and physical stressors cause autism. Do vaccinations play a role in that? 100%. You can't induce a chemical into the body, thank you, and have that not play a massive effect. You can't induce it 68 times and starting from day one with the Hep B shot and go, this is not going to have an effect on the body. Sorry, your bodies are that good, it's going to take that chemical in and it's going to have to work with it. That's what's happening. And then after that, the child doesn't seek chiropractic care and just goes along in this life of sickness, and a lot of different things start to happen. A lot of different diseases are associated with this because they're environmental. So chiropractors, what me, Dr. Collins, and the doctors here, what they do and what we do is we work with the nervous system. We make sure your nervous system are working. Every time a patient comes in, I don't care, low back pain, doesn't matter, I make sure they understand how important their nervous system is working at a full level. Because it's really vital. We're going to talk about that. Why is it important? This is pretty easy right here, okay? So the function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment and coordinate the behavior of all other living cells. Does anybody want that working? No? It's not a big deal, right? This has to be working for you to be healthy. If that's not working properly, you're not going to be healthy. There's no two ways about it. That's what it is. Everything you do in your life, doesn't matter if it's a thought, an action, a chemical you take in, it has to run through that nervous system. It can't escape that. That's how we're designed. But unfortunately, our nervous systems are so stressed out from the perfect storm that it can't adapt. And adaptability is your key to health. If you stop adapting, you start dying. You can see that everywhere in the world. No matter what you want to look at, whatever living organism that is, once it stops adapting, it's dying. And when your nervous system's way too stressed out, when we start to do this to kids, what's happening? We're seeing it. There we go. So this is a quick chart here. Actually, I saw it in Dr. Collins' office here, so I'm sure he can get you this chart. This starts to show you different levels of the spine have different nerves that come out to different functions and different organs, and those, if interfered with due to a stressed out nervous system, are going to lead to different symptomatologies. That's what our kids are facing. Two big words here, and we're going to jump into these, but nociception and proprioception. Has anybody heard the word proprioception? Good, very good. A lot of times we kind of stop that definition and we say proprioception is the ability of the body to determine where our limbs are in space. So if my hand's out here, that's my ability of proprioception. Understand that my hand's out there and I'm not looking at it. But it's much more than that. Proprioception is good input into the body. Really good motion into the body. Because when your body doesn't receive good motion, when your spinal segments are so misaligned and fixated and subluxated that your spine doesn't get the right amount of motion, it stresses out your nervous system. And we're going to talk about that. Nociception's on the other end. I gave this talk to a bunch of neurologists one time, and they challenged me on this until I opened up their same physiological textbooks and showed them that nociception is not just pain. If you actually read the textbook, it actually talks about stress. Nociception is the exact opposite of proprioception. It's bad movement into the body. It causes a lot of dysfunction throughout the body. That's what this sheet is showing you. We call this our gas pedal, and we call this our brake pedal. And I just messed that up. We call this our gas pedal, and we call this our brake pedal. Now Collins is like, he's not doing it right. And that's on this sheet. We make it really easy for you to understand that. So, position and movement and very good motion. Nociception, pain, stress, noxious, meaning really bad motion in. So here's that fancy word again, right? That really big word, subluxation. The cause, the 3 T's. Thoughts, traumas, toxins. Emotional stress, physical stress, chemical stress. All 3 of those are playing a massive role in your children's health. The neurological significance and the correction of it is what we're addressing today. The neurological significance is the 5 Ds. We're going to delve into those in a minute. It's going to get a little bit hairy, but I'm going to take you guys along a ride, okay? You're going to understand it, I promise. So, physical subluxation. So what is a subluxation? It's a misalignment and fixation of a spinal vertebra. That's all it is. So when your spine, when one vertebra or 2 vertebrae, one above each other, one below each other, is misaligned and fixated, that causes interference in your nervous system. That causes your nervous system to be stressed out because you're not getting the proper movement. You're not getting the proper proprioception. But the physical subluxation starts early. And I'm going to show you that. If you don't want to watch, don't watch. I challenge you to watch. Because this is what's happening to 1 in 3 babies. We're not there yet. We will get there. But here's a good research article. So Dr. Godfrey Gutman, an MD, found that spinal injury presenting in 80% of the infants he examined shortly after birth caused interference to their neurological and immune function. So that's an MD, and he found that spinal interference shortly after birth in 80% of kids had some interference in their nervous system, which caused interference in their immune system. And I would say 85% of kids who walk, crawl, or carried in my office, probably closer to 90 now, have this going on. So watch this. That's a vacuum being used in a C-section here. Wait for it. Here we go. Here's your 1 in 3 babies being born. Pretty simple to this point, right? But we're going to clear those shoulders into 90 and up. Yeah. So they hand that baby to mom after that, after she wakes up from the C-section, and say, hey, careful, his neck and head are going to be really vital you don't mess that up, okay? Don't drop your baby, don't do anything like that. We just yanked it out by its head, okay? So my question is, why is there not a chiropractor there ready to take control of that situation and make sure that that baby's spine is in alignment? Who agrees that that baby's spine's probably not in alignment? Pretty obvious, right? So, pulling force. How much pulling force is on a normal, everyday vaginal delivery? How many people know that? How much yanking, pulling force on the child's neck?
Not really.
Yeah, it sounds like that, but no, that's how it's supposed to happen. Yeah, most home births, nothing, right? You introduce that into a hospital, you have 40 pounds of pulling force. 40 pounds. On 1 in 3 babies born by a C-section, how much pulling force?
A lot more than that.
A lot more? Very good. Somewhere between 60 and 70 pounds of pulling force. 60 and 70. If I walked over and picked up your baby by its head, that's like 7, 8 pounds of pulling force. Are you going to let me do that? No. Or are you going to be like, he's good after that? Right? That's not happening. But what's happening in our birth process is happening every day. So when we have a baby born by forceps or vacuum, That's even worse. And I'm not saying they're not vital at times, because they are. It's more about what happens after. Are we getting our children checked? Are we going, that was pretty rough, we should probably do something? Or are we just kind of hoping for the best? Are we playing with that magic? What's happening here? So what happens here is when that baby's yanked out that way to clear those shoulders in a C-section, we start to damage this top area in the spine. That's a little important. Your brainstem sits there, by the way. That's got a lot of importance, okay? All 12 cranial nerves, very important nerves, at least have a connection to this area. The on and off button to your immune system sits right in this area. It's a really vital area. So you can see, once we damage this neurological awesome area, and then we beat it up with 68 vaccinations, and we beat it up with antibiotics, and we continue to have more physical trauma, and we continue to pump it full of toxic food, what happens? Because this was not happening 25 years ago. The autism rate wasn't 1 in 50 25 years ago. Does anybody know what it was? Yeah, close to 1 in 2,500. Yeah. That's the big change, right? But they're better diagnosing. Or, better yet, as Dr. Collins said, it's genetics. They're born with it. So sorry, science doesn't add up to that. Your genes don't quickly move that way. They don't transform that fast. That does not happen.
Well, autism doesn't show up in the genes, not in the DNA like that.
You're exactly right. I would agree. But the medical community would have you believe that most of these conditions our kids are with nowadays are genetic, and you couldn't do anything about it. It was totally unavoidable. And they hand you a pamphlet and they say good luck.
Some of them are.
Some of them are.
Genetic in the DNA.
So we could talk after, but I would definitely tell you, the science doesn't support that at all. There is no science that supports that, not one bit. I've done this for years and years and years, and scoured over the top people working with autism, worked with the DAN program doctors, all of it. There's not one evidence that shows that it actually is.
But not autism. I'm saying like...
Other conditions?
Other conditions.
2%. 2% of people are born. Yeah, so really good. That's a good point. 98% of people, it's all environmental. Dr. James Chestnut, if you want evidence on that, check that guy out. He's going to blow your mind with research, true research, and he's going to use their research too. I'm positive Dr. Collins knows who he is, and he can definitely hook you up with that information. And he also makes it really easy to understand. Really good doctor.
Can you say that name again?
Yeah, James Chestnut.
Thank you.
Totally welcome. So what happens here is we have a misalignment and fixation of the vertebra. And we have it in a really key area. And that starts to affect not only this area, but a lot of areas below that as well. So any loss of proper motion or alignment of a spinal joint results in this big fancy word. And that's the first D, disafferentation. So disafferentation is the loss of movement. Sorry, we're going to back up here. I redid this before I left, so I want to make sure we're covered. So, disafferentation, before that, we're going to cover that in a moment. But disafferentation is caused when we have that loss of motion, okay? We have a loss of motion in the spinal joint. It causes an inability of that nervous system to perceive the environment correctly. We talked a little bit about proprioception and nociception and how that works. So this is taken right out of a normal, everyday medical physiological book. So we have what's called the gait theory. Okay, we're not going to delve too much into this, but I'm going to give you a good idea. That gait theory is responsible for what's called decreased proprioception. So we have that decrease of that awesome motion. We have a decrease because there's been a misalignment and fixation of the vertebra. That then leads to that increased nociception. So what we like to say is that child can't perceive the bad environment and give out something good. So when they're perceiving their environment wrong, their output is going to be wrong. So when their proprioception is off, and that's stressing out their nervous system, their output is going to be off. So we also like to call this noise. We like to compare it to Metallica. Not that there's anything wrong with Metallica, but what happens is when that nervous system is hearing all this noise, it's hearing all this stuff, it causes issues in the brainstem, it causes issues in this cool area called the amygdala, it causes issues in the cortex, it causes issues all over in the brain. And that unfortunately leads to this stress response. And the stress response is activated by what's called the sympathetic nervous system, your gas pedal. So when your gas pedal is on, it's causing you to produce more adrenals and more stress hormones. That's what's happening. So when that disafferentation, that stressed out nervous system, reaches the central nervous system, it reaches that awesome ability for the amygdala, for the brain, for the emotional area of the brain to function appropriately, and the hippocampus, the learning center, that's where it goes first. So when we have someone that's stressed out, their anxiety is high and they're not learning well. Does that sound like ADHD? That's what's happening. So these children are continually to pump that stress response. They're pumping that sympathetic dominance. But that sympathetic dominance is needed. And we like to refer to it as, this came from when caveman was down by the watering hole, okay? It was really needed at this point too. So that lion came up to caveman and he needed to book it or fight. So it's your flight or flight response. But when you're running, unless you want to stick around and fight the tiger, you don't need certain things pumping. But you do need certain things going too. What you don't need is rest, relaxation, digest, and immune system. You don't need those. You just need to book it and get the heck out of there. So what's happening in these children is when that stress response is initiated and it's sustained because no one got rid of the disafferentation, what happens is they're running that sympathetic dominance. They're continually depressing their emotional, they're depressing their rest, relaxation, their digest. All that's being pumped down, pumped down. If you know a child with autism, about 65, 75% of them have digestive issues. It's linked to that. It's no fancy correlation that maybe these kids just have some digestive issues and they have autism. No, it's 100% linked through the nervous system. So this continues to what we call to the HPA axis. So watch this.
Some kids are really bouncy and can't sit still. Some kids aren't very coordinated. Some see food as a pile of toxic goo that hurts their mouth and jangles their taste buds. School might be a mysterious place where things don't make much sense. If this sounds like you may have sensory processing disorder, and we're going to explain it here. Your body has 7 senses: vision in your eyes, hearing in your ears, touch in your skin, taste in your mouth, and smell in your nose. And you have 2 movement senses: your muscles and your sense of balance. In sensory processing disorder, these senses don't communicate right with your brain. Think of the nerves connecting your brain and senses as a set of roads. Those roads should be smooth superhighways so that the senses and brain can communicate fast. If you have sensory processing disorder, then some of your roads are bumpy and rough. You can also think of the senses as having a broken volume control. If the volume is too high, you will feel your senses too strongly. If the volume is too low, you won't feel sensation at all. In fact, you'll want more. Some kids overcome these problems as they grow older. Others need help. Help is usually occupational therapy, and it's fun. between your senses and your brain. The more you do, the stronger and smoother they get, kind of like paving those roads. After a while, you'll learn to slow down and sit still, to pay attention, to eat, to be comfortable and happy doing movement. It takes time. There's homework, too. But the more you work at it, the better it gets.
All right. Are there any OTs in the room at all? Okay. So, occupational therapy is really good. We refer all of our kids who have autism out to an occupational therapist. But the kids that are just doing OT, they start to plateau. That's what happens. And I've seen it over and over and over again. That's usually when mom comes and gets me because they're like, hey, this is not what we thought was going to happen. They do really good work, don't get me wrong. They're restoring that proprioception to a point. But there's a point that they're not surpassing. Did anybody notice where those fancy little roads all came together at? Where was that? Very top, right? Right through here. Now this is made by an OT, and I'm not sure they actually understood what was happening when they made this video and how to all correlate with it. But that was really genius because that's where most of it starts. That's what happens with our children, is they start to lose that function right through there. And that causes an imbalance in the nervous system. And you can see that there. But with the OT world, they do really good. They do. I love them. I have some really good OTs in my community. But when that child starts to plateau and not get the results they wanted, that's because they're still subluxated. That's because there's a roadblock there, and body and brain and body are not communicating properly to each other. So that's where we step in. That's where we remove that subluxation, allow for proper proprioception, allow for proper function of that nervous system to get that child's nervous system working at the optimal level and what it was designed to do. So we have dysautonomia here. Okay, this is going back to that gas and brake pedal here. So it's a state of imbalance or dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system. Now that autonomic nervous system is a really awesome system. It controls all functions of your organs, glands, and blood vessels. So when that's interfered with, when that autonomic nervous system is continually running that sympathetic dominance, when that's running that fight or flight, we're getting a lot of sick kids because they're not hitting rest, relax, digest, and immune system. And then we're beating it up more with a bunch of environmental factors. We're going to skip that one. Same thing again, we talked about that. This is an awesome quote. I have this in my office and I make sure all the moms see this because this really starts to explain what's happening. You can't be in growth or development and protection at the same time. It cannot happen. Every physiological response in your body has to have a certain correlation to each other. And they're never going to be even like that. One's always going to be a little bit higher, one's going to be a little bit lower. That's how that works in our body. But unfortunately, the kids that are running protection, because fight or flight is protection, they're not hitting the growth. And I'm not talking about size. I'm talking about neurological growth. I'm talking about them not developing at the level they should be because from day one we stuck them in protection mode. From day one when they were yanked out and we served them up that awesome perfect storm, they were running protection mode and no one's removed it. That's what's happening. That was by Dr. Bruce Lipton. He's a PhD biologist. If you want his information, you can Google the heck out of him. He's got a bunch of stuff out there. He's really in tune to how the environment is affecting our lives. It's a study called epigenetics. And I know Dr. Collins knows about that because I just read his slip up here on the cancer talk they're giving. And they're talking all about epigenetics. Because just to give you a clue, cancer is epigenetics. Cancer is environmental. You're not born with bad cells. Cancer is all environmental. And unfortunately, that's why you're not going to find a cure. No matter how much we run or walk or wear pink, we're not going to find a cure for cancer. What we can do is finding prevention for cancer. Because that's where it starts. If we continue to chase down all of these diseases and say, play this catch-up game, how do we do this? How do we stop this from metastasizing? How do we stop this child from going down a further path of autism? We're never going to catch up because the answer is not there. The answer is in prevention. The answer is when that child is yanked out because it needed to be yanked out, because that C-section rate we improved down the road, then there's a chiropractor there. And we adjust the baby. I've been in my hospital so many times I can't go in as Uncle Nate anymore. Because I have to sneak in. They know me now. So I sneak in other ways. Don't say that anymore. Or we won't help these kids. I've been down to Tacoma. Tacoma's nice. But it's that important that we do that. I'm going to risk everything for that child. Because it's that important that we save that child's life. I really don't care if I get kicked out. It's not going to affect me. What is going to affect if we get that subluxation reduced and eliminated? So that child will leave that hospital with an optimal functioning nervous system and a chance at optimal life. That's what's important. So we talked a little bit about the immune system being on and off button right here at the top. That's directly related to your central nervous system, as well as the digestive system. Does anybody know the name Dr. Andrew Wakefield? Okay, he was the first doctor in the UK to make this correlation between this MMR vaccination. He's a gastroenterologist. And he was saying, wait a minute here, there's something going on with these kids' guts. There's something happening in here, and all these kids are being diagnosed with autism. I got to meet Andrew Wakefield last October. It was really cool. Because in a couple minutes, we raised $50,000 for this man who's been kicked out of his country, who's been stripped of his license because he did his job. Because he made a correlation. That's all he did. But they couldn't handle it. And so they stripped him of everything. Does anybody know what happened recently with that? Did anybody hear the whistleblower? So this whistleblower decided to come out and say, hey, I kind of kept all this information quiet when Andrew Wakefield was going through this stuff, and he was right. Yeah. So we have the text messages between the two, between Andrew Wakefield just recently and the whistleblower apologizing to him, saying, I'm totally sorry, man, I ruined your life. He didn't necessarily do it directly, but the country did. So I got to meet him and talk to him. And he's on a mission now, and he has a better understanding because he just found a correlation. But now he sees how the neuroimmunology starts to have an effect on the whole child's life due to a subluxation. So this is the last one. This is our last D called dysponesis. This is where we normally stop. Dysponesis, best way to describe this is the symptoms you see. This is the disorganized energy. This is the loss of symmetry between those spinal segments. This, I say, is the last one because this is where I want to catch it. But there is one more. And this is what I don't want to see. We're going to go over this in a moment, I promise. But what happens is, we'll address it now, is disconnected. That's the fifth D. Disconnected is when a child has full-blown autism or Rett syndrome. When a child walks in and they're so stressed out, that their nervous systems are so stressed out that they can't go to school, that their mom's holding them at homeschool because they're getting too many slips home, that they have too many parent-teacher conferences. That's happening. I go to these parent-teacher conferences to try to support mom. These IEPs, these 504s, how many kids are on these? There's a whole heck of a lot of kids that are unfortunately having this issue. And like I said, it's the moonwalking bear. But that dysponesis here, this really starts to describe that errors and the energy in is going to have errors on the energy out. Like I said, we can't be running stress inside the brain and have bad energy in and good energy out. We can't switch that up. It has to be bad in, we get bad out. So when that child's subluxated and that stress response is running and that bad is going in, then that's what we're going to get out. We cannot have that brain just go, okay, now we're going to have good come out. So it starts to show symptomatology, which we've labeled as autism, Asperger's, ADHD, ADD, you name it. The symptomatology, those labels are just labels. I strip that from the child the second they walk in. I really don't care what they're labeled with, because I know that the underlying issue is actually the nervous system. It doesn't really matter. So we have that disorganized energy and a loss of symmetry. So we have that misaligned or fixated segment. And that leads to what we refer to as a drunken bull, a raging bull. I'm not going to delve a lot into those today, but in my office, this is what we use. So we start to notice patterns in kids. We start to watch how their organization is in their nervous system. We start to look for symmetry. We're going to talk about these in a moment. We're going to go over the nervous system scans that are possible for your kids to get that show all of these. We look for total energy output. We look for what's happening in that nervous system. How much energy is this kid having to pump just to maintain normal? Or how much energy is this kid pumping way over normal? We like to refer to that as brain noise. That better helps patients understand that when we have Metallica running, that child can't function optimally. That nervous system is pumping and pumping and pumping and pumping way over than what it should be pumping 24 hours a day. That's disconnected. That's sobering to see, because a lot of these more than likely could have been handled. How many of these kids were on drugs? How many of these kids were on crazy drugs? Right? Now, I'm not saying these are your kids. I'm not saying that. There's a lot of crap that happened in these people's lives. I'm not saying kids with autism are headed down that path. What I'm saying is we weren't there to help them. Are we really going to blame it on those kids? We're going to say that was their fault? Or are we going to take responsibility as a society and say, hey, we totally screwed that up, and no one's looking at it? Because we're worried about what they're holding in their hand more than what's going on inside, right? We're worried about whether or not they have access to these guns, because that's the easy way. Let's address the symptom, right? Don't go after the cause, because the cause is these kids are pumped full of medication from day one, and their nervous systems are totally out of whack. That's what's happening. So when I talked about that girl lighting herself on fire, are we just going to get rid of matches now? When that starts to happen, where does it end? Where do we start to address what's really happening with our children? So this is the link between suicide and antidepressants here. This is what parents should be given when their child is prescribed an antidepressant, or themselves, but it's not. That's what's happening. So what we do is we start to measure that. We start to measure what's happening with that disafferentation, with that stressed out nervous system. So Owen's story, this is one of our scans that we run. This is telling us, hey, where's that over output? What's happening in Owen's nervous system? What's going on in there that's causing all those symptoms to show up? And so this was taken on November 30th. This is another graph we use to determine what's happening. So it didn't show up. His total energy output is 239. Understanding that we want it close to 100. He's pumping 139 way over. That's what's happening. So, on January 10th, after being adjusted, after being taken care of, we're not perfect, but we're not a Christmas tree anymore, right? So what's happening is the nervous system is starting to be balanced out. Owen is starting to have life restored to him. His energy output on that one, 134. That's pretty good. That's pretty good in a couple months. That's all it takes. With a lot of children, It's not years and years and years of care, of corrective care. What it is awesome care in the beginning and pulled back to what we call maintenance care. Because no one can escape thoughts, traumas, toxins. But that child's going to be living at a more optimal level. So those visits are going to be less and less and less. So, autism reversed in Evan. This is Evan's story. So Evan had the awesome birth that most 1 in 3 kids are having today. He was lodged, rushed to the emergency room, C-section. Evan had twitching and regular vaccination schedule at 1 year. So you want to see the perfect storm? This is what it looks like when I go into the hospital. This is what's happening, right? But this is the norm. To be totally honest with you, this is the total norm. There's no stress there. Are we saying that there's no emotional stress there? Right? No emotional stress there. Baby's just left there. Right? So before chiropractic care, he was mostly nonverbal, which we see a lot of. Speech delays and nonverbal. Unable to follow direction, poor eye contact, which we see a lot with kids that are diagnosed with autism. Very emotional and diagnosed with autism. Watch this.
Bye, Aunt Kristen.
This is before treatment here.
See you later. Oh. No?
There's not a lot of eye contact there. Do you notice the shiner he has? Yeah, proprioception, vestibular. He's tripling and falling a lot.
Yes? Do you love Aunt Kristen? Say yes.
This disconnected. So here's his scans. We can see there's nervous system interference here, 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 and here. And a little bit through the middle here. After 2 weeks, he fell asleep in the parking lot after the adjustment. Now I always tell moms and dads, don't worry if your kid falls asleep because I made the mistake once, but I'll never do it again. Because I didn't warn mom, and their kid slept for like hours. Except hadn't slept because it was running sympathetic dominance, because that child was running fight or flight consistently. And now when we release the nervous system, rest, relax, digest, and immune system is able to kick in. And he fell asleep for hours. So she calls me. She had my cell phone number and calls me. He's sleeping. What do I do? You let him sleep. He hasn't slept ever. That's what you do. But I get it. Moms are scared. So we began talking more within days, initiating speech for the first time. I can't tell you, we're going to share a story in a moment. When kids initiate speech after not talking, man, that gets me every time. I just totally get emotional. To see that connection finally, I can't even get through this. To see that connection finally between mom and child that was missing, that's when we start to see a real change. I love working with speech delayed kids, and unfortunately kids that are diagnosed with autism have a lot of that. So after 2 weeks, this is the scan here. A lot better. What you're noticing is a shift down. We're seeing a lot of nervous system interference shifting down and out. We see a lot of kids with autism. That's kind of the pattern that about 65% of them run. Down and out. So we're going to warn mom. We're going to say, hey, don't worry. If his GI stuff flares up because these nerves through here are responsible for GI, it's okay, and we expect it. But that's its body. That's the body finally returning to a normal function. That's the body finally living. But it takes a little bit. Understandably, that child went through that perfect storm that's really tough, and it's going to take a little bit of care. After 2 months, watch this. Watch the eye contact.
What's that one? What is it?
There's the verbal.
A dog.
Yes, I am.
Yeah.
I'm a truck.
What's that?
A truck.
A truck?
Truck.
Fast truck. What's that one?
I mean, but you can't shut them up now. This is good. This is really good. Today, he's speaking in full sentences, exploding with development, sleep is awesome, behaving better, potty trained, never sick, because why? Because his immune system's functioning, and nearly back on track. See how it shifted down? That's how it happens. And a lot of these kids with autism, that's what's happening. So little lady, she had a really tough childhood from early on. And I don't just mean the perfect storm, because she suffered that 100%. But unfortunately, her real mom wasn't on top of things. She was really neglected. And these awesome parents came in, swooped her up, and adopted her. 3 kids, by the way. Adopted all 3 of them. Yeah, took them out of the situation. But the problem was, Lainey, at 2 years old, just under 2, never smiled, never talked. And I'll be honest, the first day I saw her, I was scared. Because I've never seen someone at that age just stand still in my office like a statue. Ever. My office gets crazy with kids. And I've never seen someone do that at that age. We have toys and stuff in there. Normally they're playing with them. But Lainey would never even look at me. She just looked straight ahead. She had no diagnosis, no nothing like that yet. But I knew, instinctively, because I've done this for so long and I know the science, and I've watched it happen with hundreds and hundreds of kids, that once we adjust her, things are going to start to happen. Now, it wasn't the first adjustment, but it was in the first couple months. I'll never forget it. It's not this one, but this is exactly how it happened. We adjusted little Lainey right through the top there. Her very top C1 was yanked way over. We had to work with it with a little bit. But I'll never forget what happened. Because when I adjusted her, and I usually do, I'll just kind of sit in that position and I'll turn around and see their facial expression, because it's usually really priceless. But this one was extra. She smiled and said, "Mom." I can't even tell her story still. So anyway, that's huge. That's absolutely huge. So to say we're not changing children's lives, to say we're not saving children's lives, is total crap. Because Lainey's life is 100% different today. 100%. She started school. She's going to school now. And she's totally rocking out. She was born by forceps. I wish I took a picture of her head. She has the forceps scars here forever. Her head is pushed forward like this. Yeah, well, she normally wears bangs to cover it up. That's what her mom did. Her new mom, her awesome mom. So we see Lainey's family. All of them had a little bit of issue. But there's Echo, which is a really cool name. That's Echo and that's Lainey. Their lives are forever changed. And they're living at their optimal level. So the question is this. And I know a lot of you are sitting here with a lot of questions. And I get that. So what does this all mean? What does this mean for you and your family? And what does this mean for the child that's struggling? There's a lot of questions right now, and I get that. But my goal is to change the world. One child at a time. There's this awesome story, and probably a lot of you have heard of it. But there's this man walking down the beach, and he's noticed all these starfish are washed up. And he's taking them, and there's like hundreds and hundreds. And he's taking them, he's tossing them back into the ocean. And tossing them back into the ocean. And he's the only one out there, because it's a little bit of a gloomy day. But there's another man walking by with his dog, and they're out exercising. He says, "This is a waste of time. You're never going to get all of them. What does it matter?" He throws another one in. He says, "It mattered to that one." Because it does. I do this because I love it. I do this because I love to watch little Lainey's come in and have their life changed. And that's what's happening. Day in and day out, we're saving kids' lives from an unfortunate storm that they've had to go through.
I am part of a lost generation, and I refuse to believe that I can change the world. I realize this may be a shock, but happiness comes from within is a lie, and money will make me happy. So in 30 years, I will tell my children they are not the most important thing in my life.
My employer will know that I have my priorities straight because work is more important than family. I tell you this, once upon a time, families stayed together. But this will not be true in my era. This is a quick fix society. Experts tell me 30 years from now, I will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of my divorce. I do not concede that I will live in a country of my own making. In the future, environmental destruction will be the norm. No longer can it be said that my peers and I care about this earth. It will be evident that my generation is apathetic and lethargic. It is foolish to presume that there is hope. And all of this will come true unless we choose to reverse it. There is hope. It is foolish to presume that my generation is apathetic and lethargic. It will be evident that my peers and I care about this earth. No longer can it be said that environmental destruction will be the norm. In the future, I will live in a country of my own making. I do not concede that 30 years from now, I will be celebrating the 10th anniversary of my divorce. Experts tell me this is a quick fix society, but this will not be true in my era. Families stayed together once upon a time. I tell you this, family is more important than work. I have my priorities straight because my employer will know that they are not the most important thing in my life. So in 30 years, I will tell my children, money will make me happy is a lie, and true happiness comes from within. I realize this may be a shock, but I can change the world, and I refuse to believe that I am part of a lost generation.
I refuse to believe that this is a lost generation. That's what we're heading down, unless we choose to reverse it. I can't do it alone. I can't go out and grab parents and make them come in and get their children checked. But I can educate you, and I can teach you, and I can tell you the options that you have, because they weren't explained to you right. And these children's lives, they count on it. That's what's happening. So I plan to change the world, one child at a time. You guys in this community are lucky, because there's a lot of communities that don't have a trained chiropractor in this. I have to go up and down. I live in Kitsap County. So I go all the way north. I go all the way down south to make sure these kids are getting help. Because there's no one in my county besides me doing this. Because all the other chiropractors are worried about back pain. Which, don't get me wrong, is tough to live with. But it's not what chiropractic was for. Chiropractic, from the very first adjustment, was founded in neurology. It restored a man's hearing. He's actually buried in Seattle. If you want to check it out, his name's Harvey Lillard. The first adjustment was not for any type of pain at all. Chiropractic works good with pain, but it works even better with getting you living at an optimal level. I've gotten to know Dr. Collins, and I know what he provides here. Seeing his office, that's awesome. Having this, he's reaching out to you, telling you you have an option. You don't have to follow everything that was told to you from the beginning, because a lot of it was flawed. And if you can't see that, if you can't see our sick children, and you think that's a genetic makeup, if you think you weren't designed to be healthy, I don't know what to tell you. But I will tell you, you have options and you have to. Get your children checked. It's very easy.